Hi, my name is Tim Marshall, and this is my assignment number 3 for the LEAD 6153 course. And the title of the assignment is Parent Power, and this is a review of the documentary. The assignment is to answer a number of questions, and the first one will be, is this video a powerful force in policymaking, and explain. The second question is, how is the video being used to influence thinking among decision makers? I will, in the course of those two questions, analyze and discuss the pros and cons of the video. And finally, I will make recommendations on how possibly the video could be even more powerful for a force in policymaking and as an influence among decision makers. So the first question, is the video a force for policymaking? I will first address the pros. In the video, the events that were documented showed a localized effort of a group of parents to engage their local school to provide a higher level or a satisfactory level of education for their students. So the fact that this was in a very small geographical area, the people that were involved knew each other for the most part, and that makes it easier to organize. A second pro is, because they were in such a densely populated area, it was a grassroots movement which tends to attract people when they see that the others that are involved with them are actually the people that are in power. They don't have to go through a hierarchical structure. But also because it was in such a densely populated area, other agencies that were involved in the community, from social services to other political action groups, were able to see up close the results that were initially being coordinated, and they could gain even additional power by combining themselves from just a parent group to a group that included up to 8 different agencies that all had different fingers and feelers out throughout the local area. As you know, with anything, when you're talking about, you're trying to make a change in an established process or procedure, if the numbers of people that are interested and willing to put in time, the growth in those numbers equates to power and the ability to influence policy making. So as they gained access through multiple agencies to a greater number of people that were concerned about what was going on in the school, they realized they had more power. Also, this was not a one-time single issue event. Maybe it might have started that way, but the organizers had a relentless approach. They did not let a week go by without some sort of activity, meeting, reaching out, gaining access to a media source. They were always in the news, or they always kept themselves in the discussion, either by showing up at school board meetings, at district meetings, at the school itself. They approached all facets, from teachers to administrators, and again to other agencies, in an environment where they would not be seen as going away after a single meeting or two. Another pro is that they realized rather quickly, with the multi-agency effort, they were able to engage not only just the district, but also the campaigns and the politics of the area through their efforts. So we move from those pros into possible cons, as this being this video being a force for policymaking. Again, because it was a small group and a small area, initially talking about one school and then even one district, the efforts were limited to just those environments. So just that school, just that local area, just a limited section of the Bronx, and it had very, even though they were enjoining and having changes made for policy, it was only for a very small, limited geographic group. The video showed that the success was dependent upon very transformative leadership styles of a number of parents in the community. And to have that type of leadership style evolve quickly is something that's difficult to duplicate when you're talking about making sure you have those types of leaders in other areas. In many cases, these people did not have to be asked to stand up and present. They led the charge, and again, being in a densely populated area, you might have the ability to find a few more of these types of transformative leaders. But as you establish or try to establish this policy-making influence in a wider area, either those leaders quickly fall out of favor because they are so highly identified with a local area, or they're hard to find for such a large group. This approach, because it works really well in a highly densely populated area, might be seen to be specific to urban school districts, and in the areas where it was duplicated, that was the only area where we saw similar types of efforts making changes for policy making. So again, the majority of schools at risk are in urban school districts, but they're, the ability to be a force for policy making, you would hope it would be available to any and all school districts that are looking for reform. And lastly, one of the cons that it's specific to this model that might be difficult to duplicate is the multi-agency model. And again, that all depends on the dynamics of the agencies that are specific to any one urban area. Again, the groups in the Bronx were able to quickly take advantage of this multi-agency model. But again, whether that was planned or an evolution organically that came about through just one person knowing another person and having influence, it would be difficult to duplicate that, or you would have to basically structure to make sure that these multiple agencies were involved in other areas. So the next question is did the video influence the decision makers, or how does it? So from the pro standpoint, the video and the activities of the group, they rather quickly realized that if they were able to generate messages that would play well in the local media, they were able to get rather quick audiences with decision makers. So whether that was through protests in front of the school, whether it was by showing up at specific board meetings that were open to the public, they quickly realized that their ability to get their message across very quickly in multiple languages was a major factor in their ability to influence decision makers. They also, once they started to gain access to the decision makers and actually enjoy success in a number of their efforts, they rather quickly turned that success into tangible historical documents that provided them with evidence to show skeptical community members or even other decision makers that they were a group to be reckoned with, that they had a history of making and achieving specific objectives and goals available to their children through the decisions that the district superintendents and the state legislatures would, basically come to see as a group that had the ability to understand the topics and the issues and make cognizant recommendations on what their children should be presented with as students. They were able to organize meetings with politicians and decision makers rather quickly, and some might say that might have been through strong arm tactics. But if you can't have the meeting, you can't gain influence. And rather quickly, they were able to gain those meetings, and I think that might have been as a result of the multi-agency approach. It's difficult for a politician to ignore that many grassroots community agencies. Ignoring one, or ignoring a meeting of one or two might be okay, but the the media would not allow them to ignore such a large swath of community organizations. And then as they, over time, saw themselves as the ability to influence decision makers, they turned to enjoining their causes to specific political campaigns. They went outside of just a district structure and into the local campaigns of even the mayor of New York City, and became in themselves a political action group, so to speak, that had a very specific educational mandate. But again, it grew out over time. It grew out through their success, and it grew out through their communications and partnerships with the multi-agencies. So they found out rather quickly that they could become an influence at a higher level of power. So now we look and see if the video can influence decision makers outside their scope of locality. So what I found as I researched this video was the Annenberg Institute out of Brown University was one of the funders for creating the documentary, and they did a good job. Production values were high. The image is that they presented and the story that they presented were powerful. However, even on the Annenberg website, this is not a very widely distributed topic. So the video itself is not on any of the tabs. You actually have to search the video for the Parent Power video itself. There is just a one web page description of it. Comes with a couple of viewing guides, but there is not a widespread distribution or discussion on the Annenberg website of the specific video. I found out, again, through additional searches for seeing where this video might have influence throughout society, and the web page that is on Facebook for the group created by the Annenberg project has fewer than 200 followers on Facebook. So that's really surprisingly small and speaks to a very limited use of social media. And they only have 200 followers on the page is one thing, but the last post by the group was back in May of 2015. So that speaks to a relevance issue as to whether they even see themselves as decision makers. When I go to the YouTube page where the video and the documentary can be seen in its whole, there are fewer than 5,000 views on the YouTube page since 2012 when it was released. Again, that speaks to a very limited influence realm. And of those 5,000 people, how many of them are students like myself, and how many are truly influence makers, political politicians, school district leaders. So you're finding that though the message is strong and the documentary is strong, the distribution is fairly weak. When you have a good model for reform, you would expect that model to be duplicated in other areas throughout the country. And this was a good model. It did have results that were the goals and objectives of the original parents with regards to gaining access to better resources, building a school in a neighborhood that historically did not have access to middle school education. And so you see these influences, you see these successes, and you wonder why this model is not being duplicated in other locations. The Annenberg site did list a number of cities, Los Angeles, Chicago, Nashville, that had similar types of organizations, but it didn't have the impact that video had. So you wonder why this decision-making influence power is not being spread. So that being the case, great video, poor distribution. How do we combat that? So again, in this day and age, it's not about where how you watch the message. It's how you distribute the message, and it's the really the lack of appearance of this documentary in social media that was surprising. Um, the the searches that had to be done to even find the documentary were difficult. There was no link to the YouTube page from the Annenberg website, and it's their own YouTube page. There was no link to the Facebook page from the Annenberg website, and vice versa. So there has to be someone within Annenberg that is responsible for engaging audiences through social media. Grassroots depends on the utilization of messaging that can be immediate and expansive, and the best way is through social media. So how do we do that? So Facebook page, you already have it. There has to be timely posts from the organization, and that could be weekly, every other day. Those posts could be anything to do with reform and education. They need to be seen as a distributor of this message, whether they created the influential content or whether somebody else creates the influential content. Facebook, if you want to draw more readers to your page, you can take advantage of a very inexpensive sidebar ad campaign. So when somebody is in Facebook and they just happen to type education reform or grassroots, the results can be driven by sidebar ads that would bring the Annenberg Project and or the Parent Power Project to bear on the to the person that's doing the searching. That would generate views to the page, that would generate likes, and if you had timely information on the Facebook page, they would be able to generate more members for the group. There has to be some sort of single web page delivery method for national efforts for this type of educational reform. If you want to engage other cities, other urban districts, other parents into this type of action, it's not going to happen everywhere organically like it happened in the Bronx. That was specific to that organization, that was specific to that locality, that was even specific to those transformative leaders that may not be found elsewhere. There has to be some sort of training event. And Annenberg does list some training resources, but they don't do anything other than provide just that information. It has to be more of an outreach and less of just posting. There has to be a way for other organizations, other PTAs to be able to step in. And that brings me to the next recommendation, which is to possibly approach the Department of Education with this model that was successful, where it was not just a parent-driven group that was responsible for this, though they were responsible for the initial organizational design. They were not really successful until they were able to bring in other community organizations as partners to deliver the message to the school districts and to the legislatures that this type of reform was needed. The Department of Education could be the provider of this type of model to school districts to show them where and how teachers can be, how parents can be truly a force to be recognized within the realm of educational reform. And they can't do it just with themselves. They have to take advantage of other agencies, other community organizations that can provide them with resources, provide them with networking opportunities, and provide them with the numbers that they need to enforce a meeting with the decision makers. And as always, whenever you get to a end of a documentary that has a set date and time, and in this case it was 2010, the best thing to do when a long period of time has passed is produce a follow-up documentary on the Coalition for Educational Justice and other national groups to show the success of the model. Leaving the viewer hanging is it's done every day in normal serial television. So it's like bring them back to a story
that reminds them that what they're looking at is current, recent, and in this case, able to be duplicated. Leaving it at the 2010 time frame does not allow the viewer to see if the continued model evolution is successful, and it needs to be updated frequently, maybe every other year, with a good 10 to 15 minute follow-up on the activities of the group, and if the group has provided that boilerplate for other groups, start to highlight the activities of those other groups and show that this could be a national model for educational reform. Here are my references from the Annenberg site to the Facebook page and the YouTube video. Thank you.